right, so we're back for another deep dive. And, listeners wanted to explore a world of international intrigue and political influence.
Oh, yeah.
Which is always a popular topic.
Right.
So we're diving into Dan Bongino's Follow the Money.
Okay.
This book, it's all about, alleged corruption and connections with Ukraine. Ukraine's at the heart of it all,
At the center of it.
Yeah, and don't worry, we're not here to, endorse any one side or anything.
Right.
Our mission is really to unpack Bongino's arguments, right? To kind of help you connect the dots.
And he starts off with a pretty stark image, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, describing Ukraine as this giant 24-hour ATM.
Yeah.
For those looking to just profit off of its instability.
It sets the tone right. Makes you wonder who's behind those transactions, right? And what are they hoping to gain? Bongino, he kicks things off with Paul Manafort.
Yeah.
Now, that's a name you might remember from the 2016 Trump campaign.
Right. So Bongino outlines Manafort's work in Ukraine, specifically his alleged ties to these wealthy Ukrainian oligarchs.
Yeah.
And he even brings up this black ledger, supposedly documented millions in, secret payments to Manafort.
It's like a bombshell dropped right in the middle of the story, right?
Yeah.
But here's the catch.
Right.
Its authenticity is highly contested.
Yeah.
Some believe it's genuine, right?
Yeah.
A record of these shady dealings, while others claim, it was planted to discredit Manafort.
It raises a good question, though, doesn't it?
It does.
Even if the ledger is questionable, does it suggest a pattern of political maneuvering in Ukraine? I mean, that's the context.
That's what we need to consider.
Yeah, that Bongino wants us to think about.
Definitely makes you think about the motivations of everyone involved, right?
Right.
And speaking of powerful figures with potential motives, Bongino brings up, George Soros.
Oh, yeah.
Billionaire philanthropist.
Of course, yeah.
Often a target of conspiracy theories,
Well, Bongino focuses on Soros's Open Society Foundations.
Okay.
Which funded a variety of groups that were operating in Ukraine.
Right.
Including this one called the Anti-Corruption Action Center.
Okay.
ANC.
So we've got a billionaire philanthropist funding anti-corruption efforts.
Yes.
In a country known for corruption.
Right.
Seems a little paradoxical, doesn't it?
That's exactly the point Bongino is trying to make.
Okay.
He wants us to question the influence that Soros might have had in shaping events in Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
But he goes even further, connecting Soros to Glenn Simpson.
Yep. Yeah.
Founder of Fusion GPS.
Wait, Fusion GPS, hold on. That's the firm behind the Steele dossier, right?
The infamous Steele dossier, yeah.
About Trump and Russia.
Yeah, so Fusion GPS received funding from Soros.
What was that for?
Apparently for research into Russian interference in elections, not just in the U.S., but globally. Now, Bongino isn't saying that this research was bad, but he does highlight the potential for conflicts of interest when a powerful figure like Soros is funding investigations into, his political opponents.
Right, yeah. So we're starting to see this web of connections emerge, right?
We are, yeah.
From Ukrainian oligarchs to American political figures with a lot of money changing hands.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder who's pulling the strings and what their end game might be.
It does, and that leads us to perhaps the most explosive part of Bongino's narrative.
Okay.
The Biden saga.
Right.
Joe Biden, who was vice president at the time, and his son, Hunter.
Now, Hunter Biden, he landed a lucrative position, right, on the board of Burisma Holding.
A Ukrainian energy company.
And the timing was, shall we say, interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
He gets this job while his father was deeply involved in U.S. policy towards Ukraine.
Exactly. And Bongino contends that Joe Biden used his position to pressure Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
Into firing Viktor Shokin, the prosecutor general, who at the time was investigating Burisma.
He even claims that Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion loan unless Shokin was removed.
$1 billion, yeah.
And to drive the point home, he even includes what he calls a bombshell audio clip.
Right.
Alleged recording of Biden bragging about getting Shokin fired.
Now, let's be clear. The authenticity of this recording is still debated.
Of course, yeah.
But it does raise serious questions about whether U.S. foreign policy was being used to benefit Biden's family.
This story is a political minefield, and Bongino doesn't shy away from dropping those bombshells.
He doesn't.
But remember, we're not here to take sides.
We're not.
We're trying to understand the allegations and their potential implications.
Exactly. It's about looking at the evidence, considering the motivations of all the players involved, and forming your own conclusions.
So far, we've uncovered this tangled web of connections and allegations.
We have, yeah.
But this deep dive is far from over.
All right, so we're back and we're diving deeper into Bongino's follow the money.
Last time we were exploring all these claims about Ukraine, right? Right, this whole idea of it being like a hotbed of political maneuvering.
Yeah, influence peddling, all that.
Yeah, and now we're shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
To a figure who's often at the center of these kinds of controversies,
Okay, who's that?
John Brennan.
Oh, John Brennan, okay.
Former CIA director.
Right, right.
Bongino, he doesn't hold back when it comes to Brennan, does he?
No, he does not.
He accuses him of being deeply involved in spreading this whole Trump-Russia collusion narrative.
Yeah, the narrative that Bongino believes was largely unfounded.
Right. He goes so far as to say that Brennan, he selectively leaked information.
Really?
Possibly even unverified rumors, just to damage Trump's reputation.
Trying to undermine his presidency, huh?
Yeah, it's a pretty serious allegation.
It is. And to support this claim, Bongino brings up those infamous text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, remember them?
I do, yeah.
2 former FBI employees.
They were involved in the Russia investigation, right?
Right, involved in the Russia investigation. And they seem to suggest that Brennan had access to the Steele dossier.
Oh, wow.
Even before the FBI did.
If that's true, it raises some serious questions about whether the intelligence community was acting impartially or if they were pushing a particular agenda.
It also goes back to that idea we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
Using potentially questionable means to achieve political goals.
It makes you wonder, were they trying to manipulate the narrative?
Right, for their own purposes.
Pretty unsettling thought.
It is. And this leads us to another interesting character.
Okay.
In Bongino's narrative, Stefan Halper.
Stefan Halper, okay.
He was an FBI informant who played a key role in Operation Crossfire Hurricane.
That's the code name for the FBI's counterintelligence investigation, right?
Exactly, their investigation into the Trump campaign.
Right.
So Halper's role in all of this is really fascinating.
What does Bongino say about him?
Well, he contends that Halper was actively trying to entrap members of the Trump campaign.
It's like specifically
George Papadopoulos and Carter Page.
Okay.
And he suggests that Halper, who may have had ties to the CIA, was essentially tasked with creating the appearance of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, even if no such collusion actually existed.
So to back this up, what does he present?
Well, he digs into Halper's financial history,
Okay.
highlighting payments he received from the government, and even possible links to Christopher Steele.
Christopher Steele, the author of the dossier.
The author of that infamous dossier, exactly.
He even floats the idea that Halper might have been fed information from higher-ups in the intelligence community.
Possibly even Brennan himself.
So it sounds like what he's suggesting is that this whole investigation into the Trump campaign might have been driven by a pre-existing agenda.
More than genuine concerns about national security.
Yeah.
It's a pretty unsettling thought, isn't it?
It is. The idea that our own intelligence agencies might be used for political purposes.
It really challenges our assumptions about the institutions we rely on.
Right, to protect our national security, yeah.
Exactly. And from one alleged target of political maneuvering to another.
Okay.
Bongino then dives into the story of Michael Flynn.
Oh, Michael Flynn.
Trump's short-lived national security advisor.
He was forced to resign pretty quickly, wasn't he?
He was, after it was revealed that he lied to the FBI.
About his conversations with the Russian ambassador.
Right, but Bongino presents a different interpretation of events.
Oh, really?
He argues that Flynn was set up.
A setup.
A victim of a 3-part takedown.
Wow.
Orchestrated by those who wanted him out of the picture.
Okay, so break it down for me.
All right, so the first part of this alleged setup involved a dinner Flynn attended in Cambridge.
Okay.
And he was seated next to a Russian woman named Svetlana Lukova, who later became the subject of all these salacious rumors and innuendo.
Bongino suggesting this seating arrangement wasn't a coincidence?
He believes it was a deliberate attempt to create a compromising situation for Flynn.
Interesting.
Right. And then the second part of this alleged takedown involved Flynn's phone calls with the Russian ambassador.
Those were intercepted and leaked to the press, right?
They were, creating the impression that Flynn was engaged in some shady backroom dealings.
But these calls took place during the presidential transition period?
Exactly. A time when it's not uncommon for incoming officials to communicate with foreign counterparts.
Right, so he's saying Flynn was just doing his job.
Trying to smooth the transition, establish communication.
To the Russians. Yeah.
And then comes the third part of this alleged takedown.
Okay.
The FBI interview, where Flynn was ultimately charged with lying about those phone calls.
Bongino contends that the FBI agents who interviewed Flynn were already biased against him.
They went into that interview looking for a reason to take him down.
He even suggests that the FBI had initially decided to close its investigation into Flynn,
but that the decision was reversed by higher-ups.
Those who were involved in the broader investigation into the Trump campaign?
Exactly.
It's a complicated story.
It is very complicated, a lot of twists and turns.
Hard to say for sure what really happened.
Yeah, but Bongino raises some important questions.
About whether Flynn was treated fairly.
Or if he was a victim of overzealous prosecution.
So we've covered a lot of ground, from Ukraine to the Trump-Russia investigation.
We've encountered some pretty explosive allegations along the way.
Sure,
but because Bongino doesn't stop there.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Bongino's Follow the Money.
And we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have. From those shadowy dealings in Ukraine, the intelligence community.
All very interesting.
It is very interesting. But now we're facing one of the biggest events, right, in recent history, COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
And Bongino, well, he doesn't hold back on this one either.
What does he say?
He goes straight for this controversial theory, suggesting that China, they deliberately allowed the virus
to spread.
Yeah, to spread globally.
It's part of a strategy.
A strategy, he calls it a slow play offensive.
A slow play offensive. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does he mean by that?
It's like, think of it like a long game, a series of moves designed to weaken an opponent over time.
Okay.
He believes that China aimed to cripple the U.S. economy.
To hurt Trump's chances of re-election.
Yeah, in 2020.
Right. A bold claim.
It is.
What evidence does he use?
He points to a few things.
Like what?
First, he criticizes the World Health Organization.
The WHO.
Yeah, their initial response to the outbreak.
What's he saying about that?
That they downplayed the severity, resisted declaring a global health emergency.
Under pressure from China? Maybe.
Possibly, yeah.
That's interesting.
I remember those early days, so much confusion.
Yeah, so much conflicting information.
It was hard to know what to believe.
It really was. And Bongino, he highlights that while China locked down domestic travel within Hubei province, international flights from Wuhan continued for days, allowing the virus to spread beyond their borders.
So they contained it within their own country, but allowed it to spread elsewhere.
That's his argument. And he contends that this was deliberate.
To what end?
To inflict economic damage on the rest of the world.
Wow.
While protecting China's own interests.
He also goes into the origins of the virus itself, right?
Right. That whole debate about the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
The possibility of a lab leak?
Exactly. He explores that angle as well.
Does he definitively say it was a lab leak?
He doesn't definitively say that, but he points to what he sees as suspicious actions by Chinese authorities.
Like what?
Like the destruction of those early virus samples, fueling those theories.
So even if it wasn't intentionally created in a lab.
Right.
He's suggesting that China's lack of transparency.
Their attempts to cover up the outbreak are damning in their own right.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. He paints this picture of a government more concerned with protecting their image.
Than global health.
Right. Putting political expediency ahead of transparency.
Which brings us back to the WHO, right?
The World Health Organization.
Bongino's highly critical of their handling of the pandemic, especially their Director General, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus.
Yeah. What does he say about Tedros?
Accuses him of being too close to China.
And downplaying the threat.
Yeah, and he even brings up Tedros' past, highlighting his role in allegedly covering up cholera outbreaks.
Oh, wow.
When he was Ethiopia's health minister.
So essentially what Bongino is suggesting is that China exerted undue influence over the WHO.
Compromising their ability to respond effectively.
Right, right.
This whole slow play theory, as he calls it, connects back to those themes we talked about earlier, political maneuvering, hidden agendas, the pursuit of power.
It's a complex and controversial theory.
It is.
It's important to note that it's not universally accepted.
Of course, yeah.
But Bongino does present a compelling case.
He does.
That forces us to question the narratives we've been told and consider alternative interpretations.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we accept this slow play premise for a moment, what does Bongino suggest we do about it?
Well, he advocates for a strong and assertive response from the U.S.
Okay.
He calls for decoupling from China.
Reducing our reliance.
Yeah, reducing our economic reliance on them and bringing manufacturing back to American soil.
He believes we've become too vulnerable.
To their manipulation and coercion.
Right.
He also stresses the importance of strengthening our alliances with other democracies,
To counter China's influence.
especially those in the Indo-Pacific region,
He sees a united front as essential.
to upholding a rules-based international order.
And deterring China's actions.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's calling for a fundamental shift in our approach.
Yeah, how we approach our relationship with China.
He sees this as a critical moment in history, right?
A battle for global influence and the future of democracy.
He even encourages Americans to become more informed and engaged.
To challenge the narratives presented by the media.
Hold our leaders accountable.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive into Follow the Money.
We have, from Ukraine to COVID-19, Bongino has presented a really challenging and thought-provoking perspective.
It's important to remember these are just allegations and theories.
Of course.
And it's up to each individual to evaluate the evidence and form their own conclusions.
But one thing is clear. Bongino's book forces us to look beyond the surface.
And grapple with some tough questions.
This deep dive was all about equipping you with information.
Encouraging you to think critically.
About these complex events.
We hope it sparked your curiosity.
Giving you some new perspectives.
As we conclude, think about what Bongino emphasizes. Following the money.
Where else might that lead us?
What other motives and agendas might be revealed?
By tracing the flow of money and power.
It's a question worth pondering.
As we navigate this increasingly complex world.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Follow the Money.
Until next time.
Stay curious, stay informed.
And keep asking those tough questions.
Loved this video? Smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And don't forget to order the book. Link below.